I never should have bought that car. The moment I laid eyes on it, sitting in old man Crowley's overgrown yard, I felt a chill run down my spine. But I ignored it. God help me. I ignored every instinct screaming at me to walk away. It was a 1967 Pontiac GTO, midnight black with chrome trim that somehow still gleamed despite years of neglect. The paint was faded and chipped in places, revealing glimpses of deep crimson underneath, as if the car was bleeding. "She's a beauty, ain't she?" Crowley rasped, following my gaze. His roomy eyes glinted with something I couldn't quite place. Greed? Anticipation? Relief? "What's her story?" I asked, running a hand along the hood. The metal felt ice cold, despite the summer heat. Crowley shrugged, not quite meeting my eyes. "Been in the family for generations. Time to pass her on to someone who'll appreciate her." I should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why a classic muscle car was being sold for a fraction of its worth. Should have noticed how Crowley's hands shook as he handed me the keys, how he couldn't seem to get rid of it fast enough. But I was too excited. I dreamed of owning a car like this since I was a kid, and now here it was, practically being given away. I handed over the cash, signed the papers, and drove off with my prize. That's when the nightmare began. At first, it was little things. The radio would switch stations on its own, always landing on old rock songs with dark, violent lyrics. The temperature inside would plummet, no matter how high I cranked the heat. And sometimes, just at the edge of my vision, I could swear I saw dark stains spreading across the upholstery, only to vanish when I looked directly at them. I told myself I was imagining things, that an old car was bound to have quirks. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Terribly, horrifyingly wrong. It was a week after I bought the car that I first heard the whispers. I was driving home late one night, the empty highway stretching out before me, when a sound like radio static filled the car. And beneath it, barely audible, were voices. "Join us," they seemed to say. "Become one with us." I nearly drove off the road in shock. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I pulled over, hands shaking as I fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. The air inside the car grew thick and oppressive, reeking of copper and decay. And then, in the rearview mirror, I saw them. Faces, dozens of them, twisted in agony, pressing against the glass from inside the trunk. Their mouths moved in sync with the whispers, eyes pleading and accusing all at once. I screamed. I pounded on the windows, clawed at the door, desperate to escape. But the car held me prisoner, the engine roaring to life of its own accord. We sped down the highway, faster and faster, the speedometer climbing past numbers I didn't even know existed. The faces pressed closer, their whispers becoming screams. I felt cold, spectral hands grabbing at me, trying to pull me into the seats, into the very metal of the car itself. Just when I thought it was over, that I would be absorbed into whatever hell the car contained, everything stopped. The engine cut out, the whispers ceased, and the hands retreated. I found myself parked in my own driveway, drenched in sweat and shaking uncontrollably. I stumbled out of the car and ran into my house, locking the door behind me. But as I peered out the window, I saw the Pontiac sitting there, engine ticking as it cooled, looking for all the world like an ordinary classic car. But I knew better now. I knew the evil that lurked within its steel frame. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that this was only the beginning. The car wasn't just haunted. It was hungry. And somehow, I had become its next meal. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Knowing that thing was sitting in my driveway. I paced the floor, jumping at every creak and groan of the house settling. When dawn finally broke, I peered out the window, half expecting the car to be gone. But there it was, looking almost innocent in the pale morning light. I called in sick to work. There was no way I could face the outside world, not when I felt like I was losing my mind. I needed to figure out what was happening, needed to understand what I was dealing with. With shaking hands, I booted up my laptop and started researching. I looked up the history of 1967 Pontiac GTOs, searched for stories of haunted cars, even delved into occult forums discussing possessed objects. Nothing I found came close to explaining what I had experienced. As the day wore on, I found myself drawn to the window time and time again. The car sat there, unchanging, yet I could swear it was watching me, waiting. By nightfall, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, and I knew there was only one place I could get them. I had to go back to Crowley. The drive to his house was tense. Every moment, I expected the car to come alive again, to try and drag me into whatever hell it contained. But it behaved like any normal vehicle, responding to my commands without incident. Somehow, that was even more unnerving. Crowley's house looked even more decrepit in the twilight. Paint peeled from the siding, and the porch sagged dangerously. I pounded on the door, not caring how late it was. I needed answers. No response. I was about to give up when I noticed a faint light coming from the backyard. Heart pounding, I made my way around the house. What I saw there will haunt me for the rest of my days. Crowley was there, all right. He was on his knees in the middle of a circle drawn in what looked disturbingly like blood. Candles flickered at regular intervals around the circle, casting twisted shadows across the overgrown yard. And he was chanting. The words were like nothing I'd ever heard before, a guttural language that seemed to claw at my ears. As I watched, frozen in horror, the air above Crowley began to shimmer and twist. A shape was forming there, a monstrous silhouette that seemed to be composed of writhing shadows and half-glimpsed nightmares. And at its core, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a steering wheel. Crowley's chant reached a fever pitch, and the shape lunged towards him. I tried to cry out a warning, but no sound came from my throat. In an instant, the shadow enveloped Crowley. I heard one final, terrified scream before his body simply collapsed. Like a puppet with its strings cut, the shadow hung in the air for a moment, pulsing with a terrible, alien life. Then it turned towards me. I ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, scrambling back to the car without a second thought. It was only when I was on the road, putting as much distance between myself and Crowley's house as possible, that I realized my mistake. I was back in the car, the very thing I had come to ask Crowley about. The engine's purr deepened, taking on a sinister tone. The radio crackled to life, but instead of music or whispers, I heard Crowley's voice. "You shouldn't have come back, boy," he said, his voice filled with a mix of regret and malicious glee. "Now you're part of it too, part of the midnight drive." The car accelerated, speedometer climbing rapidly. I yanked at the wheel, stomped on the brakes, but nothing responded. We were flying down the road, blowing past stop signs and red lights. Other cars blared their horns as we narrowly missed them. I caught glimpses of shocked faces as we sped by, but no one could help me. I was trapped in a steel coffin, hurtling towards an unknown destination. As we raced through the night, Crowley's disembodied voice continued, "It's been waiting for someone like you. Someone young, strong. A new vessel for its hunger." The shadows on the edges of my vision were back, reaching for me with ethereal tendrils. Each one that touched me sent a jolt of icy pain through my body. "What is it?" I managed to gasp out. "What does it want?" Crowley's laughter filled the car, a sound of madness and despair. "It's older than time, boy. It feeds on fear, on suffering, and it's chosen you as its new driver." The shadows were all around me now, seeping into my skin, filling my lungs. I could feel something alien and terrible taking root in my mind, trying to push me out. With the last of my strength, I fought against it. I focused on the wheel, on the pedals, on anything that would give me back control. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, miraculously, I felt the car respond. The shadows retreated, hissing in frustration. I stomped on the brakes, bringing us to a screeching halt in the middle of an empty intersection. Crowley's voice came one last time. "Fainter now. You can't fight it forever, boy. The midnight drive always wins in the end." Then there was silence. I sat there, gasping for breath, hands clenched so tightly on the wheel that my knuckles were white. I was alive. I had fought it off, at least for now. But as I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, I saw something that made my heart stop. For just a moment, my eyes had glowed with an unearthly light. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The drive home was quiet. Too quiet. The car behaved normally, responding to my every command. But I could feel a presence lurking just beneath the surface, waiting, watching. As I pulled into my driveway, a thought struck me with terrifying clarity. I couldn't keep the car. I had to get rid of it, had to destroy it somehow. But how do you kill something that isn't alive in the first place? I spent the next few days in a paranoid haze. I called in sick to work again, ignoring the concern in my boss's voice. I couldn't risk driving the car, couldn't risk letting it take control again, but I also couldn't bring myself to go near it, to try and do something about it. So it sat in my driveway, a malevolent presence that seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. Sleep became a distant memory. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those twisted faces pressing against the glass, heard the whispers calling me to join them. I started hallucinating, seeing shadows move in the corners of my vision, feeling phantom touches on my skin. On the third day, my phone rang. It was my sister, Amy. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, worry evident in her voice. "Your boss called. Said you haven't been to work in days." I wanted to tell her everything, to pour out the whole insane story and beg for help. But the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain this without sounding completely mad? I'm fine," I lied. "Just a bad flu. I'll be back at work soon." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, "I'm coming over." Panic surged through me. No, don't. I don't want you to catch this." But Amy had always been stubborn. "Too late. I'm already on my way. See you in 20. The line went dead before I could protest further. 20 minutes. I had 20 minutes to what? Hide the car? Warn her off? Run away? In the end, I did nothing. I sat on my front porch, watching the road with a sense of impending doom. When Amy's sensible sedan pulled up beside the Pontiac, I felt my heart rate skyrocket. Amy took one look at me and her eyes widened. "Jesus, you look like hell. What's really going on?" I opened my mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Where could I even begin? But before I could say anything, Amy's gaze drifted to the Pontiac. Her brow furrowed. "Is that yours? When did you get a classic car?" As if in response to her words, the car's engine roared to life. Amy jumped, startled. "What the? Did you leave it running?" I shook my head, too terrified to speak. The car's headlights flicked on, two blazing eyes in the fading daylight. And then, to my horror, it began to move. Slowly, inexorably, it rolled down the driveway towards us. Amy took a step back, confusion turning to fear on her face. "What's happening? How is it moving on its own?" I grabbed her arm, trying to pull her towards the house. "We need to get inside. Now." But it was too late. The car accelerated suddenly, tires screeching against the asphalt. It slammed into Amy's sedan with a sickening crunch of metal on metal, shoving it aside like a toy. Amy screamed, the sound piercing through the chaos. I pushed her behind me, facing the possessed vehicle with the courage born of desperation. "Leave her alone," I shouted. "It's me you want." The car paused, engine rumbling like some great beast considering its prey. Then, quick as a striking snake, a door flew open. Shadowy tendrils shot out, wrapping around my legs, my torso, my neck. I heard Amy screaming my name as I was dragged into the car. The door slammed shut, cutting off her cries. Inside, darkness enveloped me, thick and oppressive. Crowley's voice echoed through the interior, tinged with cruel amusement. "I told you, boy, the midnight drive always wins." I felt the car begin to move, tires squealing as it peeled away from my house. Through the rear window, I could see Amy running after us, growing smaller and smaller until she disappeared from view. The shadows tightened around me, seeping into my skin, my eyes, my mouth. I could feel the car's malevolent presence invading my mind, trying to push out everything that made me who I was. I fought back with everything I had, clinging to memories of my life, my family, my own identity. But with each passing moment, I could feel myself slipping away. As we raced through the night, the world outside became a blur. Streets I'd known my whole life twisted and changed, becoming an endless maze of darkness. Were we even in the same town anymore? The same world? Hours seemed to pass, or maybe it was days. Time lost all meaning in that hellish drive. The only constant was the battle raging inside me, as I fought to maintain my sense of self against the car's relentless assault. Just when I thought all hope was lost, when I could feel the last shreds of my identity slipping away, a new voice cut through the darkness. A voice I recognized. "Fight it." Amy's voice rang out, clear and strong. "Don't you dare give up." Somehow, impossibly, she had followed us. I caught a glimpse of her sedan in the rearview mirror, battered but still running, chasing us through the nightmare landscape. Her voice was like a lifeline, giving me something to hold on to. With renewed strength, I pushed back against the shadows, against the whispers promising power and release if I'd just give in. "You can't have me," I growled, fingers tightening on the wheel. "This ends now." I stomped on the brakes, wrenching the wheel to the side. The car screamed in protest, shadows whipping around me in a frenzy. We spun out of control, tires leaving burning streaks on the pavement. The world tilted, went sideways, then upside down. I heard the shriek of tearing metal, felt the impact as we rolled once, twice, 3 times. Then, stillness. Silence. I hung upside down, held in place by my seatbelt. Every part of me ached, but the oppressive presence of the car was gone. I could think clearly for the first time in days. Hands grabbed me, pulling me from the wreckage. Amy's tear-streaked face came into view, illuminated by the flames now consuming the Pontiac. "You're okay," she sobbed, holding me close. "You're okay." As we staggered away from the burning car, I heard one last whisper on the wind. Crowley's voice, filled with rage and despair. "This isn't over, boy. The midnight drive never ends." I turned back to look at the inferno that had once been a car. As I watched, I could have sworn I saw faces in the flames, twisting in agony before disappearing into the night. Amy tugged at my arm. "Come on, we need to get you to a hospital." I nodded, letting her lead me away. But even as we left the scene behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only a temporary reprieve, that somewhere out there, the midnight drive was already seeking its next victim. And deep down, in a part of me I didn't want to acknowledge, I could still hear the engine's siren call. The next few weeks passed in a blur of hospital rooms, police interviews, and sleepless nights. Amy stayed by my side through it all, a constant presence that kept me anchored to reality when my mind threatened to drift back to that nightmarish drive. The official story was that I'd been in a car accident, lost control on a lonely stretch of road. No one believed my ramblings about a possessed car, about the faces in the flames. Even Amy, who had witnessed some of it, struggled to reconcile what she'd seen with the rational world she knew. But I knew the truth, and I knew it wasn't over. It started small, a car alarm going off for no reason, the smell of gasoline lingering in the air when there was no source, the sound of an engine revving in the dead of night, only to find the street empty when I looked. I tried to convince myself it was just paranoia, the lingering trauma of what I'd been through. But deep down, I knew better. The midnight drive was calling me back. A month after the crash, I woke in the middle of the night to find myself not in my bed, but standing in the middle of the street. In front of me was a car, not the Pontiac, but a sleek, modern sports car, midnight black with chrome trim that gleamed under the streetlights. Its engine purred, door open in silent invitation. For a moment, I felt the pull, the desire to slide behind the wheel, to feel that rush of power again. The whispers started up, promises of speed and freedom and dark delights. But this time, I was ready. "No," I said, my voice steady and firm. "You don't own me. You never did." The car's engine revved angrily, headlights flaring bright enough to blind. But I stood my ground, drawing strength from the memory of Amy's voice, from the life I'd fought so hard to reclaim. "The midnight drive is over," I declared. "Find someone else to haunt." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a scream of frustration, the car peeled away, tires leaving burning streaks on the asphalt. I watched it disappear into the night, taking with it the last vestiges of the nightmare I'd been living. As the sound of the engine faded, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The oppressive presence that had been lingering at the edges of my consciousness vanished, leaving behind a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. I turned and walked back to my house, each step feeling lighter than the last. For the first time since I'd laid eyes on that cursed Pontiac, I felt truly free. But as I reached my front door, a chill ran down my spine. In the distance, I heard the roar of an engine, followed by a scream. Someone else had been chosen for the midnight drive. I closed my eyes, silently wishing them strength. Then I went inside, locked the door, and finally allowed myself to rest. The midnight drive would go on, finding new victims, new drivers. But my part in it was over. I had faced the darkness and come out the other side. As I drifted off to sleep, I made a silent vow. I would be vigilant, watching for signs of the midnight drive's influence. And if I ever came across another poor soul caught in its grip, I would be there to help them fight it. After all, I knew better than anyone. The midnight drive may never truly end, but with courage and determination, it can be defeated. One ride at a time. Hey there! If you enjoyed this spine-chilling tale of the midnight drive, don't forget to hit that like button to send shivers down YouTube's algorithm. And if you're hungry for more terrifying stories that'll keep you up at night, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new nightmare from our channel. Thanks for watching, and remember, always check the back seat before starting your car. Sweet dreams.